Hello and welcome to episode 88 of the Crochet Cakes podcast. My name is Clarissa and I want to welcome you to my podcast about crochet and just crafty life in general. I hope that you've had a lovely 2 weeks and that you are getting ready to spend some lovely crafty time or just some plain you time for this lovely Labor Day weekend that we're having. I know it's less travel-y than we might be used to, but let's just enjoy it all the same. This week's episode, I think it's going to be very special. It's very near and dear to my heart what we're going to be talking about today because we are approaching Hispanic Heritage Month on the 15th of September, or Latin History Month, however you prefer to call it. We are approaching that. It is a US-based celebration starting on the 15th of September going on through the 15th of October. And if you're new to this channel or this podcast, you might be wondering why that is something that's very near and dear to my heart. Well, I am a Puerto Rican. I was born and raised on the island of Puerto Rico, and today I wanted to chat to you about how that affects my crafty life or my crafty view on things and just what it means to me. So as I said, I was born and raised in the island of Puerto Rico, and how I identify as Puerto Rican is through food. I've always had a deep and loving appreciation for Puerto Rican food. It is simple, it is delicious, it may or may not be healthy, but it's home and I absolutely love it. And whenever I think of Puerto Rico, my mind always ventures to the good food you can find on the island and just all the joy that usually surrounds food. Our holidays usually just honestly revolve around food. My fondest and earliest memories are of Christmas and Thanksgiving, just being surrounded by food and family and laughter. Of course, that's when you're a little kid. When you start getting older and you have teenagers in the mix, things aren't that family friendly, but it's still something that I am very, very close to, and it's honestly what I think of when I think about Puerto Rico. It's always food. And based on that, I wanted to share a little bit of some Puerto Rican food with you. Not really the food, but the basis of all Puerto Rican cooking, not baking. Puerto Rican cooking is sofrito. And today I'm going to be sharing a little clip on how I make sofrito, because honestly it's one of those things that varies from house to house, and even within my family, my aunts, my mom, and my grandmother all made sofrito different ways, using the same basic ingredients or leaving some out, or the same basic proportions. But anyway, sofrito is basically the green goddess of Puerto Rican cooking. And once you have made sofrito, you can make rice, you can make beans, you can make stews, soups, fried foods like codfish batter, my favorite. And you can just open your eyes to a beautiful new culture of food. Unless you do not like recao or coriander or cilantro, then skip ahead. I'll include a timestamp so you can avoid seeing all these green goodness, and I will just leave you with the Clarissa of the past, who will explain to you how she is making her sofrito. To make sofrito, we need a lot of greens. I have 2 bunches of cilantro, 1 bunch of culantro, I have 1 green pepper, 1 Cubanelle pepper, onion, garlic, oregano, and chop. I hope you guys enjoyed that. To me, like I said, that is the basis of all Puerto Rican cooking. It's what goes into the soul of our food. And I always joke with my husband when he asks me how I make things, like I showed you in the video. I was taught in a very frustrating manner of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, put your finger here, taste that there, and then just adjust accordingly. So when I'm cooking Puerto Rican meals, I do the same. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, taste that, no, it needs this needs that, and just start chucking things there. And my husband always gets frustrated because he's like, well, how am I going to learn how to cook this? And I'm like, well, the same way I learned, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And it's just kind of hilarious because, you know, it upsets him. But then sometimes I also say that I just listen to my ancestors, and when they tell me to stop putting salt in, I stop putting salt in. And when they tell me to add more of this, I add more of that. Because I just honestly feel that way about Puerto Rican cooking, and it's one of the first crafts I learned. It is not, I should say it's one of the first crafts that I was really passionate about when I was young, and it was cooking Puerto Rican food. I have always loved it. And when I was living in the States in northern New York and I couldn't access some of these ingredients, my soul was sad, you know, I needed some of that delicious food. If you are interested in viewing a little more recipes, I'll include a link in one of these things here, you know, the little iCard, and you will be able to access the 12 days of Christmas cooking that I did 4 years ago, I believe. And I share some recipes for Puerto Rican drinks and Puerto Rican desserts. So if you're interested, you can find that there too. But what does this have to do with crafting, Clarissa? Well, I've always considered cooking a bit of a craft, you know. It's a passion and you can be as creative as you want with it. And you have a limited yet unlimited number of supplies at your disposal to create all these meals that will taste different while using the same types of ingredients. But as I said, that was not the first craft I was introduced to. No, the first craft I was introduced to was sewing, because my grandmother was a seamstress, and honestly, most of the women in my family craft in some form or another. It's something that I was surrounded by as well while I was growing up. I was surrounded by embroidery, crochet, not knitting, and sewing. Those were the main crafts that surrounded me. And when I was very young, my grandmother was the one that used to take care of me while my parents were at work. So she was a seamstress, and I had expressed an interest in making dresses for my Barbies, but Clarissa doesn't learn stitch by stitch. She has to have a project that she can complete that will teach her that stitch. I've always been that way since I was very young. So it was very frustrating to me when my grandmother handed me a pair of scrap fabric and a hand sewing needle, and she started teaching me the stitches. That's very frustrating, so it honestly didn't last long. Do I regret that, and do I want to slap some sense into my 5-6-year-old self? Yes. Yes, I do, because do you know how far advanced in my sewing I would be right now? Because I'm 20. God, all this craziness. I don't even remember my own age. I'm 30, guys. I am 30. That could have been 25 years of my life that I would have been sewing amazing clothes and having a gorgeously handmade wardrobe. But I digress. So obviously sewing didn't really stick, and my mom, you know, she always tried to keep me active during the summers with anything crafty, and she used to sign me up to painting classes when we used to have Michaels in the island of Puerto Rico. We haven't had Michaels in years. I'm talking about I was like 9 or 10 when I went to these classes. And she also signed me up for jewelry making courses, and you know, just crafts have been a huge part of my life. Yet the one that has stuck the most is crochet, and that's the one that I did but didn't really learn from my family. So my mom is the youngest of 12 children, so she was taught to do all these crafty things during, you know, home economic classes and by her older sisters. And she, of course, thought I should learn because two of my aunts actually crochet really well. And at the time, I was not of that opinion, but if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I am participating in the Yarn Friends Rock Challenge, and in there, I shared with you for how I got into my yarny life prompt. I shared with you the beginnings of it, which was a crochet purse, because when I got into university for my bachelor's degree, I saw this girl during orientation week that had a crochet purse that she was going to use as her bag during college, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. So I went home and I told my mom, we need to learn how to crochet because I want to make this bag. And my mom, in her wisdom, in her, I want to say, not foreshadowing, but she basically said, crochet stretches, so you may not really want to have a bag from it. Let's sew a bag and make all the accessories for the bag crochet. So that's what we did. And so it had a crochet handle and it had crochet decorations, and you know, she's completely right. That handle stretched so much that the bag dragged to the ground, but it was the beginnings of my crochet journey. And now that I really think back on my childhood and whatever, we used to go a lot to fairs, and in these fairs I would always see crochet. I didn't know what it was at the time, but it's crochet. It was delicately made. You know, the art of crochet that I'm used to actually is using crochet thread, which was not very good for me at all. I still cannot use crochet thread well, at least not with such tiny hooks, but I do have an aunt, which incidentally was the first one that tried to teach me how to crochet, and I think she makes everything with like a 2mm hook. Even if it's worsted weight, she'll crochet her clothes with a 2mm hook, and I'm talking about dresses and gorgeous things. I'll include her Instagram account down below so that you can see what I'm talking about. But yes, I was basically used to crochet thread as an art, and there's nothing wrong with that. You create so many beautiful things, but it just wasn't for me. So when I really started getting into crochet, I learned with Claire of Bob Wilson 123. She's got a brilliant YouTube channel that really just teaches you all the different things you need to crochet and different techniques while you're working a project. So she's really my style of crocheter. She will not just show you the double crochet. No, we're going to be making this beanie. We are making a beanie entirely out of double crochets. So if you're not familiar with Claire's channel, she is Australian, so she teaches you how to crochet in English. And that's just how I learned. And I think it's because I knew the terminology in Spanish, sort of, but I never really paid attention to it, I guess. So all this time I've been really just involved in crocheting, and I've been learning with English patterns, learning techniques in English, learning the names of things in English, and it really hit home about 2 years ago that I'm Puerto Rican. My first language is Spanish, and my earliest memories of crafting and learning sewing and crochet were in Spanish. So why am I so much more comfortable crocheting using US terms? Because I should just say English terms, but I don't mean British, I just mean English is the language. And so I kind of started wanting to get more involved and find more Latin American crafters and join those communities. And I knew there were a lot, because if you just look crochet en español in YouTube, you get a whole bunch of videos of patterns, entire patterns and tutorials in Spanish, and I think that's wonderful. And actually that is one of the first things I did when I wanted to crochet certain things, is I would look them up in Spanish to see how the techniques differed and things like that. But I was using it more of a tool at my disposal than actually learning in crochet Spanish, or however you want to call it. So that's kind of like my journey into the Latinx community and the Latinx crafting community. And even when I started this podcast, I felt that there was a distinct lack of Spanish podcasts, but I am weird, and I don't mean weird, but I guess I was just afraid for some reason of podcasting in Spanish. And also, I don't really like the way my voice sounds in Spanish. In English, I tend to speak and read and, just talk to people in the same tone of voice. But in Spanish, I have my reading professor Spanish voice and then my colloquial Spanish voice. And I do not like how my reading Spanish professor voice sounds. I don't like it, so I don't record in Spanish because it costs me to actually actively be thinking all the time, this is not how you actually talk. What are you doing? So there's just a whole bunch of dilemmas that really I just have to get over with. But also, podcasting in Spanish and podcasting in English took a lot of time. Even though I started with the ambition of having different projects for each podcast, and then I realized I don't have time to crochet all of this and design. So I'm just going to start doing the same podcast in English and Spanish, but then the editing of it. So I just stuck with the English podcast because that's where I started, that's what I knew. But I guess you should never really stick to just what you know. You should definitely branch out. Which is why when I started blogging, I was determined that I would have a bilingual blog. Even if my non-crochet pattern posts were in English, I still wanted my patterns to be available in English and in Spanish. And that required a lot of research because the terms, just like in UK terms and US terms, they also differ. So you can say punto alto, which is a double crochet, US double crochet, or other people call it vareta, which I guess it sort of makes sense because vareta is something, it's like a stick. So I guess the double crochet looks like a stick, but that didn't really make sense to me. So, I had to pick what equivalent I was going to use and things like that. So having a bilingual pattern is easy and hard at the same time because you know what the terms are, the abbreviations, they don't really change. What changes is the way you explain it. And sometimes I'm just like, oh my God, this would be so much easier to just show people than actually write it out. But that's one of the challenges of creating patterns, is that you have to show people with words what you mean. And that requires talent and it requires practice. And I'd like to think I'm getting there. I like to think I've learned during all this journey. And so all this kind of interest into having two parts of my life be bilingual, because I am bilingual. I was almost multilingual because my dad tried to teach me Italian because he speaks Italian, and some of it stuck. And then during college I tried learning French, and the only reason I don't speak fluent French is that I was very lazy practicing and nobody else spoke French that I knew, so couldn't really practice spoken French. But reading French, I can still read. It's very fun to read, and I usually try to have a book in French that I am reading. I haven't had one in a while. I do have, actually. That is a lie, I am sorry. I did start reading The Little Prince, Le Petit Prince, in French because I have it in Spanish and in English. So I thought it would be awesome to read it in French. And I think Allison of the KCACY podcast, she collects Harry Potter books in different languages, which I think is great because potentially you could teach yourself all these languages, right? By reading. I'm ambitious that way. So that is how my crochet journey started and how my exploration of the Latinx crafting community started. And I think I'm just going to put a name out there that you're probably, if you're a knitter, you're super familiar with. Joji Locatelli. Joji Locatelli. She is from Argentina, if I am not mistaken. So she is Latin American. Anyway, to help you along, and to celebrate, because we need to celebrate our differences as well as our similarities, I am hosting a Latinx Crafter MAl. So what this entails is that you pick a pattern or a yarn that's been dyed by a member of the Latinx community and you use it to make a project, or maybe you buy fiber and you spin it, or you buy a sewing pattern and you sew. It is a MAl. It is open to all form of crafts, because as I just said, I was raised with all these different crafts, and I want to encourage you to explore as many crafty rabbit holes as you want in as many different languages as you can. And I know it'll be a challenge because some of you might be like, Clarissa, I don't speak Spanish. I don't read Spanish. What am I gonna do? Well, some designers have patterns like me that are bilingual. So of course you could choose one of my patterns, because Puerto Rican, I count as Latin American. And my patterns, as I said, are available in English and in Spanish, so you could go there. Sandra of Nomad Stitches, she does her patterns in English and Spanish, and I'm actually working on one of her patterns, which I'll share with you in a little bit. And I also have a small list of Latinx crafters that I've included in a blog post. I'll link that down below, and you can go check them out, because some of them also had patterns available in English and in Spanish. And if they are charted, like this top that I'm wearing, which I'll also talk to you about, you could just follow the chart and you don't need to follow the instructions. But of course, that is if you are a more experienced, advanced crocheter. So to celebrate all this, I wanted to share with you projects that I've made by Latin American designers, and some that I've just made because they were in Spanish and I wanted to learn the crochet terminology in Spanish. So that is the example of the top I'm wearing. I am wearing the top Amelia, which is a design by Laura of Susimiu. She is a Spanish designer and she has the most gorgeous blog. She also has a store where she sells Casa Sol Filicolor yarn, and I'm very, very, very sad that she doesn't ship to the US, because I was able to get my hands on that yarn once when my mom traveled to Spain. She asked me what I wanted and I said yarn, because that is the best souvenir, isn't it? And she brought me back 2 cones of their extra large cotton yarn, and it is just gorgeous to work with. They're also doing acrylic now. They call it veggie wool, which I thought was very interesting. But yes, back to the top. This is the top Amelia. It is a yoked top, so it starts in the yoke and then it just goes down. And I made it using burlap comfy cotton. I believe I used 2 balls of burlap comfy cotton. The details have to be somewhere. But it is in the Granny Smith colorway, and it's a very simple top. It's done in double crochet or punto alto, and it's got a very simple filet pattern that you can see on the yoke, and you can also see it on the border of the top. It is very loose fitting, and when I first crocheted it, the yoke was a lot bigger. I think it started here. So I wasn't very comfortable because it kept falling when I moved, and this one still falls a little bit, but not as much, and I added to the neckline. I believe I've shared this top with you before, but it is still a favorite of mine. I love Bernat Comfy Baby Cotton. I think that's the full name. I love this yarn, and I really, really wish it came in more colors than it does, and colors that weren't so babyish, because this Granny Smith and I think the Ivory or Cream are probably the only 2 colors from their yarn that I would use. And this, I know, has been finished a long time ago, but I do have some finished objects to share with you, and one of them is a pattern by my lovely mom. For those of you who don't know, my mom is Mind and Muse Crafts, and she hosts a podcast and here on YouTube as well. She has a website where she does free crochet patterns. She's got a sock pattern and a collar, which is gorgeous. It's like a proper collar, and several other designs that I just love. And so when I had this idea to host the Latinx MAl, I approached her and I asked if she'd be willing to design something for this mal. And she said yes. And not only did she design one thing, she's designed two things. She's designed a cookie wall hanging. The cookie is the one of the traditional Taino symbols on the island. And she also designed a pineapple toilet cozy. And I am absolutely in love with this. So I tested the pattern for her, and I, of course, I didn't use the yarn she did because I wanted to use stash. So this is made using 3 strands of Cascade ultra fine Pima cotton, which I think is discontinued, but it's a 100% cotton colorway, and it's kind of like a golden roddy yellow. So I held 3 strands of that yarn together, and then for the green, which looks marled, I held a red heart green, which is kind of like the lighter minty lime green, which I think it's red heart soft. I've had it forever, so I don't have a ball band anymore. And then the Karen Simply Soft in the Chartreuse colorway, held those together to create a chunky because the pattern is written for a chunky. So that's the only thing I changed. I changed the yarn I was using, but I didn't change the hook size or anything. And it fits a jumbo or extra large. Let me just show you. There is a toilet roll in there, and this is a toilet roll cozy, like I said, and I love that. I love the top, that it really looks like a crown, and then the leaves fold under so you can cover it without having to have a proper lid. And I really just appreciate this. Now, I'm pretty sure, because my yarn ended up being thicker than hers, that I would definitely have to block this a little bit to get that toilet roll to come out of there, or actually to go in there. But it fits, and you can work it up in an afternoon. And I honestly think they're just the cutest decorations. And she also includes some really interesting information about pineapples in there, so those are fun. I actually have other finished objects to share with you, and these are my explorations, sort of. So, I think I've said it before, I collect books. All sorts of books, but I go thrifting for crochet books, and I found one from the 1980s. It's a MAl's, and they had a pattern there for a crochet oven mitt, and I decided to tinker around with it to actually share this with you, an adaptation of this pattern with you on the blog. Differences of mine, this one actually has some mistakes because it's too small, but I still use it, and it's held up in 425-degree Fahrenheit oven temperature for an hour, taking the Dutch pot out of there, so yay, it works. So main differences, I lined mine, and it also has quilter's batting because I just wasn't comfortable. I didn't think the crochet itself would keep the heat away, sorry. And then I made another one, which is the proper oven mitt size, and I'm very excited. This one, I'll have the pattern all written up soon. I'm working on pictures for the lining because it's very simple. All I did was measure the oven mitt around and then cut, measuring a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I used fabric from Stash. You need cut two pieces of the oven lining and then 2 pieces of the batting, and you're done. But this will be a quick little make that I'll have for you on the blog as part of the cakes side of my name. And of course, I have a project here by Sandra of Nomad Stitches, who is a Latinx crafter, maker, designer, and I've shared this with you in multiple stages. I forget how much. It's not done yet. I was being really ambitious and I wanted it to be done this week, but it hasn't been a very good crochet week for me. It's just, I don't think I've been in the right mindset. I don't know in what mindset I've been, but it's been fighting me. I have all the crochet ideas. They just don't want to flow. But anyway, I am up to the 3rd chart of the bottom of the Mozaica Gunesh top, which, as I said, is a pattern by Sandra of Nomad Stitches. And I believe I've talked to you in detail about my dilemma of the yarn that I chose. So coming up on camera, I think you can sort of see the design that she meant for you to see when you crochet this up, but in real life, I do not see that design. I see something entirely different because I'm using a variegated yarn, heavily variegated yarn, and a solid color yarn held together. I mean, sorry, for alternating in the rows, because this is color work. It is mosaic crochet, single row mosaic crochet done in the round. And it's my first experience with crochet color work, which is a technique that I wanted to learn. So while the yarns that I chose were driving me a little bit crazy, and I did go stash diving, but I realized that most of the coordinating colors that I have are variegated because I built up my stash years ago and I just wanted pretty things. I didn't know how they would crochet up, and I didn't care how they crochet up. I just wanted pretty things. And now that I'm older, much older, and wiser, I realize variegated yarns in crochet will get you two things: lots of variegation or pooling. So anyway, I just decided to stick with the yarns that were already here, but I wasn't really attracted to the pattern, and it's not the pattern's fault. The pattern is so gorgeous, and as I said, you follow charts. And I think that's part of the problem of it for me. I don't like these charts. I have to sit down and analyze them to have them make sense to me, which is not a bad thing. You're learning a new technique. So I've had to approach this project with a bit of creative theory, and it's essentially that, what are my reasons for making this garment? Well, number one, I wanted to try color work crochet, and mosaic is color work. So that's my number one. Number two, I am using 3 hanks of yarn for this project. The variegated and the solid gold yarn are wool. One is BFL silk and one is 75-25 merino nylon. And the white or cream, actually it's cream ivory, it's Knit Picks fingering weight cotton, so it's 50% cotton, 50% acrylic, I think. And so that brings me to the second reason why I wanted to make this. I wanted to see if combining cotton and wool would make a garment that I could wear more often in the Florida heat and in the Puerto Rico heat, because I usually travel to tropical places. So these are my reasons for making this. And of course, I wanted to make a pattern by Sandra of Nomad Stitches, and I wanted to make it in Spanish. Now, since I'm still at the crochet charts section, I think I've mostly been using the English version, but that doesn't really matter because there's no written instructions there. It's just charts. So that's where I'm at with this Mozaica Gunesh top. But I also wanted to chat a little quick chatty chat about the ones I want to make. So scrolling through the list that I made for Latinx crafters, and my Instagram feed actually, I follow a fellow crafter, Latin American crafter, that does tapestry crochet, so that can continue in the vein of crochet color work. And she sells her patterns, but she has a free pattern, so you can familiarize yourself with how she explains things and the tapestry crochet technique, and maybe find out if it's something you like, and then, you know, support her by buying the patterns. So I'm going to tackle this free pattern, and it seems to be a notions pouch made with granny, using tapestry crochet to make grannies. So I'm just going to pick out my colors and see what I come up with. And the other one, of course, is because September, the autumnal equinox, is almost here. It'll be 22nd. I'm sure it'll be 22nd in blink of an eye. And pumpkins, guys. I want to decorate my house with pumpkins, so of course I want to crochet some pumpkins, because I think I don't have any crochet pumpkins. Actually, I don't think I managed to make one last year. And here's my thing. I love decorating for fall, but how do you decide if you do fall or Halloween? Do you start your fall decorations in September, and then when Halloween comes around, do you leave your pumpkins out and then put out all your other Halloween stuff and then take them down after Dia de los Muertos and then put up all your fall stuff back up? how do you navigate this fall or Halloween thing? Or do you only decorate for one or the other? I'm interested to know, honestly. So please comment down below, because I have issues navigating this, especially because the aesthetic I want for fall and the aesthetic I want for Halloween are completely different. And I know that if you do traditional Samhain or Halloween, you're usually using similar decorations, but I want to add a bit of Addams Family vibe to my Halloween decorations. So there's going to be a lot of black lace and black velvet, burgundy velvet. And I say there's going to be because I will one day have an Addams Family style living room for Halloween. It's going to take years, but I will get there. So those are my crafting plans for this Latinx MAl, sorry, it's a MAl. And also I am participating in a hashtag Latin Maker Month, and that is run by Underground Crafter. And she approached me and invited me to join this takeover of her Instagram feed, where from the 15th of September to the 15th of October, she will showcase one Latin maker in her feed. So I'm going to be taking over on the 15th of September. I was the one that just volunteered to go straight in there. And so if you want to have a look at that, I will link her Instagram account down below, and I will also do a special post on my Instagram for the 15th of September. So grab your yarns, grab your hooks, grab your patterns, and please join us for this Latin Maker MAl. Or Latin Crafter MAl. I forgot the actual hashtag I created for it, so I will have included it here and down below as well, so you don't get as confused and lost as I am, or I probably may do. But I'm very thankful that you stuck around with me for this little crafty chat, and please let me know if you would want to participate down below and what you would like to make, and please let me know how you navigate the fall Halloween decoration things. I'm just curious. But I think that's it for the crafty chat this week. I have to go bake a cake now because my husband is going out on a get-together with some friends that I'm just still not confident enough to be around groups of people. So I will just make a cake that he can take. I'm making a chocolate cake, by the way, if you're interested. Are you baking? Let me know. Let me know what you're baking in the comments below, because I feel that I should bring the baking talk and segment of the Crochet Cakes podcast back, or I could just do it on Instagram, like Instagram stories, which is what I've been trying to do, is post my baking content on Instagram stories. I have fun. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for spending your crafty time with me, and I hope that you've enjoyed this episode and that you learned a little bit more about me if you were interested in knowing more about me and my crafty life. And just a general thank you. Thank you for checking out my YouTube channel, for checking out my blog, for checking out Pinterest, Instagram, and everywhere. I am Crochet Cakes, guys. I am Crochet Cakes. Oh, and another thing. I released the dress pattern, the shift dress pattern that I was wearing a couple of weeks ago. That is already live on the blog, so check that out if you want to. All the links that you need will be in the description box below. So there's nothing left but for me to wish you a happy crafting, and please stay safe and take care of yourself. Bye!